and she got better. And not all mental health conditions require medication. The first did. And I'm here because I want to end the silence. I don't want my daughters to fear coming to me or to have conversations if they are struggling or they're feeling something. And the good news about your generation is you guys are really open to talking about mental health conditions, which is great. But kind of more concerning news is that suicide, depression, anxiety is on the rise. And there are reasons for that. And I'm here to not scare you at all. I'm here to offer you guys hope, because the earlier you get help, or you get your friend help, or your loved one help, or you start talking about it, the better. We're going to talk about that. And I think another really great thing to know is that getting better, it's not just possible, it's probable. Okay, so I'm going to share this presentation, and if it's okay, I'll take questions at the end. So hold on to those questions. You can also see me at the end if you don't feel like talking about it publicly, no problem.
So what's mental health? Well, first of all, we all have it. You probably know someone who's living with depression, PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder,
OCD or bipolar 1 or 2.
Regardless of whether or not you live with a mental health condition, we all have mental health. And so it is so imperative that we start prioritizing our mental health just as much as we do our physical health.
It can be on a spectrum. You can be in a really good position in your mental health or in a struggling position with your mental health. Either way, we all have it, and it's totally normal.
Taking care of our mental health ensures that we are able to live productive and happy lives.
So that's a good thing to remember. We all have mental health. Just like you have physical health, you have mental health. And sometimes people think, oh, no, that doesn't affect me. Actually, it does. We all, just like we have good physical health when we take care of our body, we have good mental health when we take care of our mind and our brain. All right, what does it mean to have mental health? Well, like I said, we all experience it. And well, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? It means that we're able to enjoy our life and feel good and deal with emotions and stress and challenges in positive ways. And mental health can be maintained with good habits. So good habits are good coping mechanisms. And if you went to your doctor today and your doctor said, what are the three, they usually start with, what are the three things that would be good for your mental health? Sleep, diet, and exercise. Let's start with those three. If those are good, if you're getting a good night's sleep and you're eating well and you're exercising, chances are your health is going to be improved if you weren't. Well, the same goes for your mental health. Those three things are really important for your mental health. Guys, how much better do you feel after a good night's sleep, right? How much worse do you feel when you haven't slept well? So you can see they go hand in hand. And we know that maintained with good habits helps our mental health. Yesterday, the Surgeon General of the United States, so like the head doctor, came out with a warning. And you know how you see on cigarette packets, they say like, warning, bad for your health. The Surgeon General has declared social media a real hazard for youth's mental health. We have a crisis these days. Guys, I get it. I'm on social media. I see the addictive power of it. I love it. It can be really fun sometimes, but it also can be really detrimental. My daughter, my 11th grade daughter, she's a creative person. She just told me the other day that she realized she needed to take TikTok off her phone because she was finding that she wasn't as creative as she was because she just was spending all that time scrolling. And we know that it's just not great for our health. So consider that. Consider taking a little break from social media and see if that helps improve your mental health. But there are a lot of other coping mechanisms, which we'll get to in a second. So what are mental health conditions? Well, they're medical conditions, just like physical conditions. They're conditions that change the way people think, feel, and act. So my mom, who I say has bipolar, she acts differently when she is not regulated, when she's going from one pole to the other, when she's going from depression to mania, it affects the way she acts. And this is something to remember. It's common, and the good news, treatable. Now, what mental health conditions are not? Well, they're no one's fault. There are so many incredibly talented people, politicians, artists, musicians, business people, you name it. And they are successful regardless of their mental health condition. It doesn't define them. And earlier I said my mom has bipolar. I no longer say my mom is bipolar because you would say, oh, my mom is diabetes. My mom has diabetes. She doesn't have diabetes. I'm just using that as an example. So we say that she has this condition. It doesn't define her. My mom also owns a restaurant. My mom is a great artist. My mom is a grandmother. She thinks she's a comedian. All of these things, right? So yes, she has bipolar, but it does not define her. And it should not limit anyone's goals. In fact, like I said, some of the most successful people out there have mental health conditions. Now let's talk about some facts. 1 in 6 youth in the United States will experience or are experiencing a mental health condition at some point in their lives. We know during the pandemic it was probably higher, right? I almost want to say, like, I kind of joke about this, but I think it was like 1 in 1, right? During the pandemic, we were isolated, we didn't get to be with our friends. I saw it with my own daughters. It was really hard on you guys. You're not meant to be in your bedroom staring at a screen for school. You're meant to be with friends and socializing. Connection, community, that is so important. Another thing that the Surgeon General came out with is the fact that loneliness is almost as detrimental as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Hard to believe, but that's what he said. And that's because having a community is so important. We're meant to be with others. We're meant to help each other. And so that's why I say coping mechanisms, push yourself to join clubs, join sports teams, maybe have a party and invite friends over. Just, it's unbelievable the amount of happiness friendship brings. I say that from experience. When I go out with my girlfriends for dinner, I can't tell you how much better I feel talking to people. It's just so important. And it's unbelievable the weight that comes off our shoulders when we are social. And now, let's talk again about these facts. So 50% of youth ages 8 to 15 with a mental health condition don't receive help. And that's a lot. That's a lot of people that are not getting help. And we also know that mental health conditions sometimes can start as early as 14, potentially a little earlier, but there are signs, and we're going to talk about those red flags and those signs that you can look out for. And well, why aren't they talking about it, or why aren't they getting help? It's because of stigma. What is stigma? Stigma is shame or embarrassment, right? Like, that's why my mom didn't want to talk about it. She was afraid. That's why some of you might not want to seek some help or go to a counselor or discuss it openly because maybe you're afraid to be labeled. But the truth is, that's why we're doing this presentation. We want to end the silence. We want to talk about it. Like I said, it's unbelievable about talking about things, how this kind of burden gets taken off your shoulders. And that's what I found with my podcast called Dear Family, which a lot of these people in the videos, I've interviewed them, so you can check them out. Just having that community to discuss with, maybe it's just even a therapist, how helpful that is. Now, words really do matter, just like I mentioned how I say my mom has bipolar, she is not bipolar, and maybe we'll say a mental health condition instead of a brain disorder or brain disease. That sounds a little scarier, doesn't it? And maybe you say the weather is unpredictable instead of, oh, the weather is so bipolar. Because someone that has bipolar might feel bad about that you're using that language. My daughter has schizophrenia, like I said, instead of my daughter is schizophrenic. Person with a mental health condition instead of consumer or client or patient. And then maybe saying lives with or has or experiences this mental health condition as opposed to suffers from or afflicted with or mentally ill. And guess what? I still say suffers from, and I catch myself. Another one that's not on here that I have really kind of worked on saying is I say died by suicide instead of committed suicide, because commit has such a negative connotation, like commit a crime or, commit adultery or whatever you want to say. So I say died by suicide, because words are powerful.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of stigma surrounding mental health. Stigma is a negative association to something. One of the best ways that we can get rid of it is by having open and honest conversations surrounding mental health.
It's important that we realize that we have the power to decrease and end the stigma. This will allow for us to feel safer and to feel better about reaching out for help and actually feeling heard and seen and knowing that we're not alone.
And one of the things I want to say is I love that I'm able to come in and talk to students, because the earlier you get help, the better. And let's think about it as like a physical illness or a physical condition. Imagine you're outside riding your bike and you fall and you break your arm. What's going to happen if you don't go to the doctor and get it set? Well, you might not be able to write. Your posture might get thrown off. You might continue to feel pain for the rest of your life. You might end up not being able to join that sports team, and that might make you feel really bad, or whatever, exercise that you enjoy doing. You might end up putting on a lot of weight, which could cause diabetes, and all of these things. You can see how it can spiral out, down and down, 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 if you didn't get your arm set. Well, let's look at it the other way. What if you're 14, 15, 16, you break your arm and you go to the doctor and you get it set? You're young enough that your body is going to heal so fast that cast might come off in a week or two, and it would be as if nothing really happened, right? Maybe a little scar, who knows? Same thing with mental health. The earlier you get help, the better. Your brain, especially at this age, there's this term that's called plasticity. It's able to kind of bounce back. So if you are dealing with a condition and go and seek a doctor's help or a therapist's help, or start talking about it earlier on, I'm telling you, you're going to get better and you're going to heal. So let's talk about warning signs. Now, and maybe I can, if you want, you can raise your hand and take it and guess on, we'll go through these one at a time what you think it might be. But when we talk about warning signs, before we go through this list, we're looking at severity and duration. Like, how severe is it? How long is it lasting? And like the intensity of it. Because, okay, let's look at this first one. And when I say warning sign, a warning sign is like, maybe this is something I'm noticing. Maybe it's time for me to speak to the pediatrician, or maybe it's time for me to go speak to the social workers or counselors here, or maybe an aunt or an uncle that I really trust, or a coach, or even just talking about it with a friend. Maybe you don't feel comfortable talking about it with your parents, and that's okay. And I'm not going to tell you which one of my daughters went to a therapist, but they're currently seeing a therapist right now, because they did not want to talk to me, who talks about mental health all the time, and I understand that. Kids, you don't want to talk to your parents about a lot of things. I get it, especially at this age. Totally normal, totally fine. But talk to somebody if you see a warning sign, or maybe you notice this in your friend. So let's look at the first one. What do you think feeling very sad or withdrawn for more than 2 weeks might be? Anybody want to take a guess what you think that might be? If you're thinking depression, you're correct. And the reason why it says more than 2 weeks is because we feel sad all the time, and that's normal, right? If you didn't feel sad, we question it, right? Human emotions are part of living. Suffering is part of being human, but it's when it's more than 2 weeks. Of course, you're going to be sad if a grandparent dies or a pet dies or you don't get invited to a party or these normal kind of ups and downs of life. It's when it's more than 2 weeks. That's a sign. If someone's not coming out of their bedroom and suddenly not wanting to participate in anything and losing interest, that's a sign. Maybe they're dealing with depression. What about severe out-of-control risk-taking behaviors that cause harm to self or others? So that can be a few different things. It can be ADHD, it can be mania, it can be all kinds of things. But when it's out of control and it's causing harm, that might be a warning sign that there's a mental health condition. Sudden overwhelming fear for no reason, sometimes with a racing heart, physical discomfort, or fast breathing. Anyone want to take a guess? If you're thinking anxiety disorder, panic disorder, you're correct. And what I want to just remind you guys is that a little anxiety is normal. A little anxiety is actually kind of healthy. If you didn't feel anxious before a big game or you didn't push yourself a little bit, sometimes it's like, what's the difference between anxiety and adrenaline? They kind of can go pretty close, but it's when it's for no reason or it continues. The test is over and you're still so anxious, or you're having this fast breathing, or you feel like you're having a panic attack. That can feel really scary, and I've witnessed it many times with people that I absolutely love, and I have such sympathy for them. And it's true anxiety disorder, and we need to figure out coping mechanisms, healthy coping mechanisms, and not turn to the wrong substances, which is what my brother did, which is what my mom did. We'll talk about my brother in a second. Seeing, hearing, or believing things that aren't real. So if you're thinking schizophrenia or psychosis, you're correct. And back to my mom's story. My mom, when she went from being very depressed to swing to being very manic, she was unable to sleep, and she wasn't taking her medications at this point. This was during the pandemic when this happened, and she really started getting paranoid, and she thought that her husband was poisoning her. She thought that the police were going to put her in jail for tax fraud. She thought the FBI was following her. All of these kind of things that were not in touch with reality. And she did need to go to a mental health facility, a mental hospital. She was put on a 5150, that's a hold where they keep her for at least 3 days. She was there for over a week. She actually came out stabilized, great. She now promises to take her medication every day. But when people are believing things that aren't real, that is typically a sign. What about drastic changes in mood, behavior, personality, or sleeping habits? I just kind of mentioned it, bipolar, right? Again, it's those poles. And sometimes there's something called rapid cycling. It's when people rapidly go from mania to depression. That's a really scary thing for them. And the interesting thing to know about bipolar is that often people that are bipolar, they consider suicide, and it's when they're in the manic phase that they act upon the suicide. When they're depressed, they might not have the energy even to follow through with the plan. I realize these are really scary things to talk about, and I just want, again, to remind you that all of this can be prevented or helped. All right, this is the last page of warning signs. What about extreme difficulty concentrating or staying still that puts a person in physical danger or causes school failure? So if you're thinking ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADD, you're correct. And I want to tell you a little bit about my brother who went here as well. My brother was captain of the football team the year they went all city. He played varsity baseball. He was a scholar athlete, such a good looking guy. Back then in the 80s, because you guys don't do this now, but the phone rang off the hook. Now you guys text each other. He was, I mean, tons of friends, but was constantly getting in trouble. Suspended, arrested, you name it, he was in trouble. And he had ADHD and none of us knew. We just thought, oh, he's just so hyperactive, he can't sit still, he loses his wallet constantly, what have you. And he went all the way through college, experimenting with all different kinds of drugs to try to help him. And that was not helpful, as you can imagine. And not until he got into law school, believe it or not, did he discover something called crystal meth. Well, what's crystal meth? It's speed. What do you give to people dealing with ADHD? You give them a form of speed, but it's monitored, and that's what Adderall and some of those medications can do, but they need to be monitored. So you can imagine what happens if somebody starts doing crystal meth. Well, they're going to get addicted. My brother ended up getting kicked out of the place he was renting, ended up living in his car, and then his car got repossessed. So my brother was homeless and addicted to drugs. And it was just so heartbreaking. I'll never forget, he came to my door sick from like a physical illness with fever, and I had just had a baby, and I couldn't let him stay with me because I was like, you're going to get my brand new infant ill, and I had to turn my own brother away. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Like my mom, it's a very happy story. I'm happy to tell you my brother is sober. He's been sober for 17 years. He went to rehab. He was lucky he had a family there to support him and pick him up. He's now married, successful business. He hosts AA meetings. He's incredible. He's my episode number 1 if you want to hear about him. But so much heartache could have been prevented had he been properly diagnosed. What about throwing up, using laxatives, or not eating to lose weight, significant weight loss or weight gain? And we're talking about significant, right? So if you've got eating disorder or disordered eating, you're correct. So those are warning signs. Maybe it's time to seek some help. And I know many people that have disordered eating, and it's not just girls or it's everybody deals with this. So we need to remember that. What about using alcohol or drugs excessively? So that's substance abuse. And like I mentioned, my brother tried using cocaine or alcohol or all these other substances to help him, including crystal meth. And that was the wrong drug, right? It wasn't, had he gone to a doctor or maybe had better coping mechanisms like yoga or just therapy, maybe he could have avoided it. And I say this a lot, on college campuses and high school campuses, kids turn to alcohol to help them with anxiety, social anxiety at parties or whatever. And it's the wrong thing to turn to. So we would much prefer in this mental health world, you find healthy coping mechanisms, healthy strategies, right? So, and then the last one is trying to harm oneself, attempting suicide, or making plans to do so. And that is suicide ideation. And I just want to mention this. If you've ever thought for a second about suicide, don't worry. It's normal. It comes and goes. It's when it keeps going and you make a plan, or someone you love is talking about it. That's not just a warning sign. I call that like a full blaring siren, like immediate attention. This isn't something you wait on.
I was scared to talk to my friends and my family because I didn't know how they would react. I didn't want to push them in the corner of, oh, this is what you have to say, or make them think I was doing something for attention. So I didn't get help for a while, and I tried to manage my symptoms on my own, but my symptoms didn't go away. They fluctuated since then. I can remember the day where it hit me so hard that it felt just like a physical, I'm 14 and I feel like 60 at this point. Like the world is just weighing on me and I just don't know what to do with it. I need to tell someone.
So what can you do? Well, you can talk to a trusted adult and more than one if necessary. And you can talk to a friend, or you can talk to a friend, or you can send a message to someone who cares. And you can say things like, I haven't felt, like myself lately, I don't know what to do, can I talk to you about it? Or I'm worried about stuff that's going on right now, do you have time to talk? Or I'm having a really hard time, will you go with me to see someone? Asking for help, it's brave. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's really brave. And that's because you're not willing to give up. You're willing to fight for yourself. And being that person to help someone is also amazing. And I have to say, it's sometimes the people that you least expect, like my grandfather, who seemed like he had everything going for him. It's sometimes people with the biggest smile who have everything that you think is going on in their life is perfect. You don't always know what's behind a happy face. So that's why it's important to really check in and have deep conversations and not just say like, oh, are you okay? Yeah, okay, great, and then move on. No, dig a little deeper. Now, how do you be a friend? Well, start a conversation and offer support. And you can say things like, well, it really worries me to hear you talking like this. Let's talk to someone about it. So maybe this is somebody you really care about and you're concerned. There's some of those warning signs. Or tell me more about what's happening. Maybe if I understand better, we can find a solution together. Or I've noticed you sleeping more or eating less. I'm here if you need to talk. Sometimes that's all it takes is just saying, I'm here. I've done that many times with my daughters. They don't want to hear a lecture from me. I just say, I'm here. And no judgment, I'm here. And then offer support. Would you like to go to a support group or a meeting? Or I really want to help you. What can I do to help you right now? Or let's sit down together and look for places to get help. I can go with you too. And again, NAMI.org, great resources for you to get some help. And be a friend. Learn more about these mental health conditions you're already learning right now, which is so fabulous. It's so great that you guys are here and listening. And avoid saying things like, oh, you'll get over it, or like what I used to say with my mom, like, come on, Mom, snap out of it. She couldn't. Tell your friend that it gets better, right? Hope is so powerful. So know that. Now, let's talk about the warning signs of suicide. Because if someone needs, if there's a warning sign, they need immediate attention. It's a true emergency. If they're talking or writing or drawing about death, or talking about how they have no reason to live, or they're a burden to others, or what's the point, or I don't want to be here tomorrow, or they're looking for ways, maybe a plan, or they are feeling hopeless or desperate or trapped, or they're giving away their possessions, or they're behaving really recklessly, that's not that little red flag warning sign, that's that blaring sign warning sign. And, my grandfather, when I was 16, and he invited the whole family to brunch, and he was in an especially happy mood when he had been depressed for a long time, and he was giving away his possessions. And nobody thought to ask him because we didn't know. And I always wonder, what would have been different if we had known that that was a warning sign? And I say this all the time about suicide, and I'm going to repeat it because it's so powerful. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So let me say that again. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The problems someone is feeling when they're having brain pain, it feels like it's not going to end, but it does. And I have to tell you, there's this man named Kevin Hines that I interviewed on my podcast. He jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and he lived when he made it into the ocean, and which is also unheard of in of itself. And he stayed alive because a sea lion kept bumping him up to the surface until somebody found him, like the Coast Guard saw him and rescued him. And he goes around talking to everyone saying he's so glad that he survived. The moment he jumped, he knew it was a mistake. And I mean, this was after multiple surgeries, and he's an incredible guy. You should look him up, Kevin Hines. But the thing that's so amazing is that people that do survive suicide attempts, that's what they'll say. I was in so much pain at that moment. I just wanted it to end, but I'm so grateful. I'm here for another day. And that's what we need to remind people. And, it's a little bit ironic. My mom, when she was having those suicidal thoughts, because she has had suicidal thoughts, she still is very much taking care of her physical health, going to the doctor, eating healthy, walking the dog, all those things. She wanted to live. She just wanted that pain in her brain and the mental kind of strife she was dealing with at that moment to end. So what can you do? Well, take it seriously. And I know that this sounds like a scary question to ask, but ask them, are you thinking about suicide? Do you have a plan? It's a very scary thing to ask. I've had to do it, but guess what? It could save a life, and you're not planting a seed where there wasn't one before. You're opening up a conversation. And don't leave them alone. Tell an adult you trust. Don't say, I'm going to keep this a secret. You can't. You cannot keep it a secret. You need to tell an adult. And then call or text 988. So this is so amazing, guys, this new number, 988. It used to be you would have to call 911, and then if there was a true crisis, they would send out police or cops. And that would just escalate a situation. Who wants policemen coming with guns? And that's not going to help. So you call 988 or text 988. And there's someone on the other end that knows how to de-escalate these situations. There's social workers, and God forbid they need to send somebody out. It's somebody in plain clothes that can handle the situation. That's not going to make it scarier, right? So it started last year, so it's rolling out, and it might have a few kinks, but it's an amazing resource. You guys can text 988 and get resources. Or you can go to an emergency room, but do not keep the warning signs a secret. All right, how do you make symptoms better? Well, know that there's help, and that there's hope, and that there's treatment, right? There's so many resources out there.
It's really important to remember there are a lot of treatment options available. So if you try one and you might not really like it, it's not a bad thing to move on and try another one. One option is medication, which works differently for everyone. Medication may really help your friend, may not really help you. And the same goes for therapy. Some people really like one-on-one therapy. Other people really like group therapy. One-on-one therapy has been a huge part of my recovery. And it was actually a huge part of my life even before I was diagnosed. And it's always helped me to talk to someone who is not part of my day-to-day life, and you can just help me straightforwardly and only talk about me.
And another writer, he's also on my podcast, and he had a real psychotic break in high school, and he's doing great now. But he's very open about it. It's very helpful. So what are some positive coping strategies? We talked about sleep, exercise, diet, maybe writing, journaling, maybe getting involved, joining clubs, sports, hobbies, hanging out with friends, maybe taking a social media break. Maybe for me, what I love to do is I love to put my headset on and take my dog out on a walk and just zone out, look at the trees, smell the flowers. It's unbelievable when we use our five senses, how we can kind of get out of our head, and just finding these positive coping mechanisms are very helpful. And then these strategies are key to improving and maintaining mental health. And it doesn't always require medication if you have a mental health condition. Sometimes it's literally taking a yoga class every week or whatever it is. Sometimes it's just having that talk therapy. It's unbelievable how helpful it is to speak to somebody. And we don't have time for this, but these are just success stories. All these young people had a diagnosable mental health condition, and they asked for help, and they're doing great. So, how do you help? Well, recognize those warning signs. Encourage your friend to talk to a trusted adult, or if you yourself need to, go speak to an adult. Share resources. Include them in your plans. help them to stay positive and optimistic, encourage them to follow their treatment plan. Are we done? Sorry, I went over. Thanks, guys. Take care of yourself. And if you want, there's some resources up here. And come grab a band for Mental Health Awareness Month. Take care, everybody. Have fun in life. I would say fun is a great coping mechanism. Bye. Are we allowed to? Yes, please. Please take them. Thank you. Sorry, I went over.
I'll end stream. And okay.